Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everybody. My guest today is Rhonda Levaldo, who's an activist for Native American rights. She's also the host of a radio show about Native rights, and she's also a professor at university. So Rhonda, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit to say something more complete about who you are?
Yes, I'm Rhonda Levaldo. I'm Acoma Pueblo from Acoma, New Mexico. I currently reside in Lawrence, Kansas. I teach at Haskell Indian Nations University, which is the only four-year tribal university for Native Americans that is strictly for Native Americans. You have to be from a federally recognized tribe to come to our school. So it's all indigenous here. I also do a radio show in Kansas City called Native Spirit, just Native American music. And yeah, that's basically me. I also run the notinourhonor.com website that is part of our trying to get Kansas City to change their name.
Okay. We'll talk about that as well during this interview, which of course will be about your activity as an activist for Native American rights. So thanks for your time. Thanks for being here, Rhonda. First off, you're the host of a radio show. It's called Native Spirit. Would you like to tell us something about what you do in this show?
Yeah, I mostly just play music, Native American music. And then I want to show people that, we don't just play, I think typical people think we play flute music or just powwow or, traditional music. A lot of our people are contemporary. So we have rock bands, we have country bands, we have rap groups, blues, jazz. So I try to introduce people to these types of different genres that our Native people are part of. And a lot of times people don't realize that there are Native Americans who do beyond traditional music. Not there's anything wrong with traditional music, but I just want to introduce them to that, to support them because they're not getting the support they need. And it's really hard to break into the industry. You have to know a lot of people. So I feel like I'm giving them an outlet in Kansas City that people can listen to them. I also do news, letting people know what's going on across the country within that week. And then as well as having guests on my show, talk about things they're doing. So I've done interviews when we were in North Dakota for Dakota Access Pipeline, protests that were going on. In Minneapolis, I went to Minneapolis when the George Floyd protests were going on and interviewed Native people up there and how they were participating in the Black Lives Matter movement. So I try to show people that, our people are part of these conversations nationally that are going on, especially in the elections that took place this past year and how that affected them. So I try to, be very inclusive of our Native people and try to get other people within mainstream media to include us as well in that conversation. I can say that I've made a lot of friends within the journalism community who try and recognize to include us in their stories.
I'm not a journalist, but that's what I'm trying to do as well. I'm not a professional, but that's what I'm trying to do as well. So what are the main social issues that a Native American faces in today's America?
I think, a lot of times people tend to think that we're invisible, that we're not part of that conversation. So we're often left out. I know one particular example was CNN did a poll, and I think it was during the elections, and they had African Americans, Hispanic Americans, and then Asian Americans, and then it listed something else. And so everybody was so we're something else. We're not, we were the first people here, and you didn't include us in this part of this conversation. And so I think being invisible, first of all, and people don't realize that we're still here. And that's what we're always trying to put out there, that we're still here. You need to include our voice in decisions and things that are going on. And for the most part, I think with what's been happening with COVID, a lot of the things that our people have been doing have been getting a lot of stories out because we're trying to protect our people. A lot of our people were affected very badly during COVID. We lost a lot of our people in different reservations, and they tried to take, protocols to make sure that we're protecting our own by having lockdowns. When the states wouldn't have lockdowns, when the cities wouldn't have lockdowns, our reservations were putting themselves on lockdown and not allowing non-natives to come onto their land. And some states didn't like that. The state of South Dakota was trying to get then President Trump to stop the tribes to stop having these roadblocks up. And they were like, no, we're sovereign nations. You can't do that. And so, we're doing that to protect our people and to make sure that, they're being taken care of. I know for the longest time, I couldn't see my mother. I still haven't seen my grandmother. I've been able to see my mother once, but I understand why, because I don't want to bring something back that may adversely affect them. And, it's been difficult. I know, like, for not only for us, but, those that are away from our people, but, our students as well that have to deal with what's been going on. So, that it's really been, I guess, one thing that we've been seeing at how different populations have been affected by this pandemic.
Yeah, definitely. Well, how is a Natives Day different from the one of any other person belonging to an American majority?
I would say, a lot of United States citizens don't understand the history of our people, and they're just starting to learn about the things that we have gone through, a history, and that's not really being taught to American society in general. A lot of times, like when I was a student in grade school and high school, we were a very small chapter of the history book, when really our history is United States history, and that's not being taught. So it's really sanitized of like what they're teaching young kids. They're not telling them about the massacres that happened. They're not telling them about how our people were slaughtered, and nobody cared. They thought we were a problem, and they basically just wanted to get rid of us, put them on reservations, put them away from everybody else, and then what's been going on recently within the past couple of years. That's been coming out. Of course, you should know about Canada. It's the boarding schools and how our young children were taken away from their parents and sent away to boarding schools. And these boarding schools were, just basically hellholes for our kids. Their hair was cut, their clothes taken away, their identity stripped. The stories that have been coming out, especially in Canada, are just really sad, but it happened here in the United States too. Imagine being taken away from your parents when you're 3 or 4 years old, and you're no longer identified by your name, but by a number. The kids were given a number for their name. And it's terrible. And then all the other stories that have been coming out of how kids would hear other kids being beaten, and they would just keep quiet because they didn't want to get beaten. Even killed, and now all these bodies are being found on these residential school areas, and that's just the beginning. That hasn't even come to fruition here in the United States. Like, they haven't even started doing the digging of the residential schools here, the boarding schools that were here. How many kids that went missing and were never found are going to be found? And it's really sad. I'm glad it's coming out. But at the same time, it's sad that United States Americans don't realize this happened. They're like, I didn't know this happened. It's like, well, you know why you didn't know it happened? Because it's not taught in the school system, and it needs to be taught. And this all trickles down to this, what we call historical trauma, where our people have to relive this type of stuff constantly and remember it. And this is what has affected our grandparents, our parents, and then to us. It trickles down to who we are as a people. It made our grandparents or maybe even their great grandparents not want to be Native American. they wanted to get rid of that identity so that, you know, their kids didn't have to suffer. So that also led to the loss of languages, loss of culture, loss of who we are. And so, you know, it's all a big, you know, a big bad thing that was going on. And we're just trying to tell our students about it, especially at Haskell. I always talk about this in my classes. And a lot of our students now, you know, they don't understand all of their culture, and they're just relearning it. They're understanding it now. They're re-educating themselves. And I had a student who, you know, we were online, and she let me know that she didn't understand how this was going to impact her as a person, as a Native person, because she never identified as that. And now it's really impacting her. And she was starting to have like emotional trauma from it. And she wanted to get some counseling. And I'd never realized that, you know, we have to take this and make sure that students understand that they may experience what happened a long time ago. It may affect them emotionally. And so, you know, going forward, I'm like, wow, I really need to be careful about, you know, letting our students know, like, a disclaimer that you may experience something that you may not understand, or you may not have experienced before after learning about what all happened to our people. So I think that, you know, we carry all this stuff on us like every day of who our people, you know, were affected, and how bad they were affected. Some days for me, I'm like, man, I just, you know, I can't deal with this, because I have to constantly talk about it. And other days, you know, just trying to help other people deal with it and help them understand. And, you know, when we have non-natives tell us, one of the worst things is that I get people, you know, on the internet talking to me, and they're like, well, my family, my immediate family didn't do that to you, so you just need to get over it. And it's like, how do you tell somebody to get over your ancestors being slaughtered? You would never say that to the people who lost somebody at 9/11, right?
Right.
So to me, it's like those people are always going to remember what happened to their family. The same way with us. You know, we are always trying to make sure that we're, you know, dealing with it, we're educating others, and we remember them, because they lost their lives for us to be here.
I think that the common misconception that you already mentioned something about it is that most of the natives live in Indian reservations, but actually a lot of people, you're telling me, are not inside reservations. So how many people actually live in those areas, and what's the difference between living in and living out?
So I wouldn't know off the top of my head how many natives live on the reservation. I mean, Navajo Nation has probably one of the biggest reservations, and a lot of people still living on the reservation. And, you know, we have all of them scattered throughout the United States. But because of what was done to try and assimilate Native Americans into regular society by taking kids and putting them in boarding schools, they also did these kind of like these incentives for natives to leave the reservation, and gave them money to like move to a city. And so they had this displacement where they would have natives moving to like LA or San Francisco or to Minneapolis, is a really big urban Indian area. And they did this so to pull them away from their people, and then, you know, plant them in a city. So then they're going to lose their culture, lose their language, lose that attachment to who they are. So there's a big influx of Native Americans in Minneapolis, in Chicago, in Kansas City, in LA, in Albuquerque, in Phoenix. So you have all these, Seattle, Portland. There's a lot of urban Indians, and we call them urban Indians, in these areas. But for the most part, I think a lot of our people that were put in these cities still maintained a tie to who they are. And also, one of the good things is that they built up their own little community. And so they were able to maintain those ties through those communities that they had in these big cities.
Okay, another misconception, at least here in Italy, is that natives are like one single big group. While I think that there are different tribes and that they are different from each other, would you like to explain us how?
Yeah, so we have over 500 tribes here in the United States, and each tribe is their own, sovereign nation. So think of it as your own country. And although the United States doesn't think of us like that, they don't treat us like that. So we have our own tribes, we have our own languages, we have our own religions, our own culture, our own ceremonies. Each tribe is different. And so comes with that, our different understandings of, the way we even think of different concepts, maybe. So all those are totally different from one another. And even the way we dress, the way we sing, the way we carry our hair or clothing that we wear, those are all different. And so those are, 500 different things. So I think the way to maybe understand that is someone from Sicily the same way as it's someone from Milan, or, each one has their different identities. So, it's kind of like that. And so for me, I'm Acoma Pueblo, and there are different Pueblos, but we're not all the same, even though we might be lumped into Pueblos, but we're not all the same. So you have Hopi, Acoma, Zuni, we're not all the same. We all speak different languages and different ceremonies, even though we're all Pueblo. Same way with Lakota. They have Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, and then they have their different bands within those different groups. And then they have their different languages. So they're not all just one. And so, it's important to understand that, those are different and unique things for each tribe. And a lot of people, I know they try and lump us into one, that we all look the same, that we all dress the same, and that's not even who we are.
I understand. What do you think about the way how natives are depicted in fiction, such as Western movies or novels or anything of the sort?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I teach about in my class. I teach a mass communication class, and I talk about how films were really the bad impact on us as Native people, because films went all over the world. And those films that you had of the very beginning, the very first films that came out were of Native people. And the reason why was because they thought we were all going to die off. We were all going to be killed off. So we better go out and, film these people, because they're going to be gone in 50 years. And so, it was kind of this vanishing American stereotype that they wanted to capture. And of course, it's that wasn't the case. And then you had the cowboy and Indian stereotype, John Wayne. Those were really impactful as well, because, they were using that whole, genre that we all wear headdresses, that we live in teepees, that's who we are. And even where they were filming was on Navajo Nation land, and Navajos didn't live in teepees. That's not, they lived in hogans. And they didn't even wear headdresses. So, it was kind of this weird stereotype of that's who we all look like. And so again, that impact of those films going all over the world, it really was bad. And so that's what we're trying to combat now, is those stereotypes of what we're supposed to look like. Because when I have students that don't look like me, they look, Asian, they look Hispanic, they look African-American, they look white, and when somebody comes up to them and tells them, or they're talking about who they are, and they're like, oh, I'm, Cherokee or Lakota, and somebody says, "Oh, well, you don't look Native American," that diminishes who they are as a person. That affects their self-esteem of who they're supposed to be. Well, who are you to determine what a Native American is supposed to look like? Like that to me is really, kind of crazy. A lot of times, like when I talk about who I am, and I'll say I'm Acapulco Pueblo, and I've never heard of that. Well, just because you never heard of it doesn't mean that I'm not Native American, just that you don't know about other tribes. So, you have to be careful about when you meet somebody and they talk about who they are, and to like not to diminish who they are and saying, "Oh, well, you don't look like that." That doesn't matter. And I know a lot of my students that don't look Native American, it really affects them. It really does. It bothers them a lot. And it's kind of like a thing where I have to tell them, you cannot let that, you're not supposed to let it bother you, but yes, I understand why it bothers you. And, people just don't know that, natives look different nowadays. And so, yeah, it's kind of a crazy situation with our identity. And, I think like people have to understand that not all natives look alike. Again, that stereotype that we're monolithic and we're all supposed to look the same. They're not all going to look like me.
I would like you to tell that to a lot of Italians who think that Black people can't be Italian.
Yeah, same way. Yeah.
So I understand what you mean very well. Well, we're now in the middle of a pandemic. Is it more difficult for natives to have access to vaccines or hospitals or medical cures or anything of the sort?
So in the beginning, like they were, actually our Indian Health Services were doing a great job. Like they were managing us to get vaccinated as soon as possible. I think like here in Kansas, we have our own Indian Health Service, and we were one of the first groups to get vaccinated just because, our populations were being adversely affected. And they were able to get that done. And so I've had both my vaccines and my booster. And they've done a great job of that. Unfortunately, now we're like at this point where people are running out of the rapid tests and testing services. And I've come across that here at my IHS too, that they don't have rapid tests, but I was able to get tested. So I think for the most part, you just have to keep looking now because everyone's trying to get tested, especially with this new variant coming across. But for the most part, I think our Indian Health Services have done a great job. And they've opened up their vaccinations to non-natives to come get vaccinated. I know in Oklahoma tribes have their own health services, and they've opened up to the community to be vaccinated. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't want to get vaccinated. I don't understand why, but yeah, it's just kind of a weird situation in the United States. You'd think people want to get vaccinated and you think they're infringing on their rights for some odd reason.
Well, it's not very different here. We have the same problem. Well, let's get to a point that I know is very meaningful for you. You're one of the founders of Not in Our Honor, an association with advocates against the usage of Native imagery and names in sports teams, like you already mentioned, Kansas City Chiefs, or I think the most famous case is the Washington Redskins, who already dropped the Redskins word from their name, and now they just call it, I think they're just called the Washington Football Club, something of the sort. Would you like to tell us something about it?
Yeah, so in 2005, we were all college students here in Lawrence. I went to the University of Kansas with some of my other friends. And then, of course, we have Haskell here too. And we got together and organized. We wanted to have kind of like a rally to let people know that we didn't appreciate Kansas City's name. And at the time, they had fans who would dress up in war bonnets and face paint and all the crazy stuff. And they were playing Washington at the time. And so we wanted to make sure we were there. And it actually turned out to be this very big event. Like I was kind of surprised because this was right before like social media, you know, and managed to get the word out. And we had people from everywhere come out and support us and be there. And so that was the beginning of Not in Our Honor. And we started to at least do a protest once a year during the season. We ramped it up really 2 years ago because of the Black Lives Matter movement with the George Floyd protests, with social justice issues coming to fruition and people paying attention to that. And then also with the NFL, they started, putting these hashtag end racism logos in the end zone. And we just thought it was ironic because they were putting that right above the Chiefs logo or the Chiefs name in the end zone. We're like, how can you end racism if you have this name right there? And so we started going out to every game to protest that was here in town and, just make sure our voice was heard. But at the time, that was right before the vaccines and everything. So they had a reduced capacity. There wasn't a lot of people that were going to the games that were allowed to go. So there wasn't that many people. But when, this year, of course, it's full capacity. There's more people. We went to Super Bowl when they played Tampa Bay. And I don't think Kansas City thought we were going to be there, but we were there and we put out a plane that was flying overhead and it had that, stop the chop, end racism. And we had put up a website with a petition to change the name. And yeah, we got a lot of attention. And while we were there at Super Bowl, we had another group that was with us. And so we got a lot of publicity out of that. And even the Daily Mail covered it, which was kind of funny. So, a lot of people were hearing about what we were doing. And then when we came back, we wanted to make sure we were here for this time at the games. And of course, now it's more people out there. And now we're seeing a lot of people who are very not happy with what we're doing because we're putting up billboards. We've had the plane flying overhead in Nashville. Kansas City played Nashville. And then when this past weekend, Kansas City played Denver, just to try and get people to see what we're doing. And a lot of the fans don't like that. And so we're seeing a lot more backlash when we're at the protests that people are starting to, come up to us and get angry at us and yell at us. I think it's because we're all tired of being kept inside. Yeah, I'm tired of it too. They want to be at the game and have fun, but at the same time, at what cost? This team is being ridiculous with continuing to try and push that they're for social justice issues, but they're continuing to have this name. And, they have a big drum that they beat in the stadium. And of course, doing the chop, which is just completely stupid and cringy. So, we just want to keep pushing, especially with, Washington going down, Cleveland changing their name. It's time. It's time. This is it. You can't keep putting these statements out there that you guys are engaging with the Native community. They haven't engaged with us. They haven't talked to us. They won't because they know they're not going to get anywhere. So it's pretty crazy, the things we've gone through. But for the most part, we're still going to be out there, and we keep telling them, we're not going to go away.
Well, you know what? Don't take it bad, but I thought that using these kind of names for sports clubs was a celebration of the culture. I thought like the Washington Redskins were actually celebrating the culture of Native Americans. Of course, I was mistaken.
Yeah. A lot of people, they tell us that. They're like, you're just gonna let people know that you guys aren't around anymore. I'm like, oh, really? Like, just because they're not using my name, I'm no longer going to be here? Like, that's kind of a weird situation. Like, we're always going to be here. We've continued to be here. We've been here from the beginning. No matter what you've tried to do, kill our people off, get rid of us through boarding schools, assimilate us, we're still here and we're continuing to be here. I mean, we're going to continue to keep this fight going. I mean, I don't understand where, some people think that we're killing our own selves off. It's just like, no, I'd rather be remembered for something, that our people have done than for this, stupid name and a logo and the name of the stadium and a stupid chalk. That's ridiculous.
What suggestion would you give governments of the United States and Canada to improve the situation for natives in terms of rights?
So I know we've had like things with the federal government and making sure that our sovereign rights are upheld, but treating us as sovereign nations. For the most part, like this administration has tried to help us out, like having Deb Haaland put in as Department of Interior Secretary, which has been great because now we have somebody who oversees, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Bureau of Indian Education, who understands what our system is. We don't have to educate or re-educate them on what they're doing. And of course, overseeing Bureau of Land Management. We're the ones who've been trying to take care of the land. We're the ones who've been telling people about environmental issues and climate change. And so it's nice to have her in that position, but we can't think that she's going to solve everything. So, they have to engage with all these different tribal nations as well, because we all have different issues that we're dealing with. Navajo Nation has different issues than the Cherokee Nation, or, from anywhere on the East Coast or the Western Coast, those tribes have totally different issues that they're dealing with. So there needs to be engagement process with each tribal nation. And I know that's tough, but they try to do that by having these different summits with the tribes, with their tribal leaders. And I think that's a really great start. But also, not leave it to the states. I know a lot of times, like with gaming compacts, they have the tribes engage with the state. And I'm like, why are we engaging with the state? Like that we're above the state. We should be engaging with somebody else, not with the state. But again, I know there's a lot of, but they really need to listen to our people, because I think that they've been telling them from the get-go about what's been. We had
Sorry, Rhonda, I lost you for a few seconds.
Yeah.
Can you summarize what you said in the last minute?
Yeah. So, we've had, different Native people that have run for office, and we had Deb Haaland and Sharice Davids who were elected to Congress. I see in the future more of our people running for offices within the state, within national offices, and wanting to be engaged to make change for their people. And I think that's really important. So we have a voice in these different issues. And of course, here, like in Lawrence, we had a Navajo woman who was elected within this city's boundaries to the Kansas House of Representatives. And I think that's great, that we have a say-so now, somebody who's speaking up for us. But yeah, it's just been, little by little, and hopefully more of our people start running for those leadership positions.
Many thanks for your time, Rhonda. I hope that spreading around what you had to say can be useful for Native American rights. So I'm doing my little piece to help you guys tonight. Thanks again for your time. Thanks everybody for watching this. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and see you next time. Bye-bye.